Hello and welcome to GFI India's India webinar, Building India's Smart Protein Workforce, where we will be presenting insights from GFI India's recently completed talent mapping study. Before we dive into the webinar, I'll briefly introduce GFI India and our work. For those not yet familiar with our organization, the Good Food Institute India is part of a network of nonprofit agencies in seven key regions: India, Asia Pacific, Israel, the United States, Brazil, Europe, and most recently Japan, with 100 plus team members around the globe. Put simply, as an organization, we work with scientists, entrepreneurs, investors, and other stakeholders, diversifying protein sources for a more secure, sustainable, and just food system. We primarily function across three broad pillars. Our science and technology team works with researchers, scientists, educators, and students to build research and talent in smart protein. Our industry team provides support to industry entrepreneurs, large corporates, and startups, as well as investors and financial institutions. Our policy team advocates for fair regulation of plant based and cultivated meat and works with governments to increase investment in sustainable protein R&D. Alongside that, GF Ideas India is our community for innovators who are transforming our food system by creating or expanding access to smart protein solutions. The aim of this community is to advance the smart protein ecosystem in and for India. We host regular knowledge sharing webinars by domain experts and multiple social and professional networking initiatives. We also publish newsletters featuring deep dives across various topics in smart protein. So let's start with a short introduction to alternative proteins, or smart proteins as we call them in India. To understand why we need smart proteins, we must go into this key question. Our population is growing and we're facing depletion of essential resources, which brings about this pressing question. How will we feed nearly 10 billion people globally by 2050 while safeguarding the environment, public health, and our scarce natural resources? India is a globally important country, now the most populous country in the world that accounts for more than 15% of that 10 billion in 2025. And it has all the right ingredients to become an important champion for alternative proteins. We're talking about this now because industrial animal agriculture sits in the center of pressing issues like food insecurity, zoonotic diseases, pandemics, and antimicrobial resistance. It simply is an effective solution to address the growing protein demand. Therefore, we propose smart proteins as a solution. By definition, smart proteins are plant based, fermentation derived, and cultivated proteins that aim to reliably and predictably substitute the consumption of animal derived meat, eggs, and dairy because they perfectly replicate the sensory, cultural, and nutritional experience for the consumers. This category gives consumers the opportunity to make informed choices that have positive implications for public and planetary health. Most of us are familiar with plant based foods. These are products biomimicking meat, eggs, and dairy using plants as the building blocks. Since plants, like animal products, are also composed of protein, fat, vitamins, minerals, and water. Fermentation in recent years has come to be known as a key enabling technology for the all protein industry that allows the production of standalone protein sources or functional ingredients from microorganisms such as filamentous fungi and bacteria. Last, we have cultivated meat, or you might be more familiar with the term lab grown meat, which is in essence real meat grown from cells outside of an animal. India has huge potential to rise to the top as a global leader in smart protein. In the following slides, we'll cover how this can happen across various domains, as well as GFI India's work to leverage and advance this potential. On the upside, India has tremendous crop biodiversity with crops like pulses, millets, hemp, etc., offering huge promise to diversify the raw materials for the entire global all protein sector. Significant work remains to make this a reality across the value chain, including genomic, agronomic processing, basic food science, and the applications level. Lower labor costs and a large educated workforce mean that, in theory, the cost of experimentation in India is lower than in developed markets. Inspiring talent with translational skill sets to enter the all protein sector and navigating issues with ease of doing business and infrastructure will be key to realizing this potential. A large, diverse population with rising protein demand creates a significant domestic addressable market over the next decade. This market is heterogeneous and presents opportunities across early adopter cohorts initially, as well as a broader base of consumption underpinned by aspiration and protein demand. As you can see, there are three different scenarios on this graph. The global scenario is growing, and even if you look at lower yield scenarios, there is a market. While consumer interest is certainly high across many geographies, the all protein supply chain will need to scale rapidly to keep pace with this demand and growth. And this is where India can certainly play a big role. Since 2019, there have been over 500 products in the market from 80 plus brands, and these range across various formats like plant based keema, samosas, kebabs, tikkas, nuggets, and more across the meat category, and also plant based egg and beverage products. You may have seen most of these brand names in your local supermarkets as well. India's biomanufacturing potential is massive, and the government recognizes that. As part of the Bio E3 policy, the Department of Biotechnology highlighted functional foods and smart proteins as one of six key thematic areas, releasing funding calls for establishing biofoundries and equipping industry and academic facilities with cutting edge infrastructure needed to advance research and position India as a biomanufacturing hub. In addition to the research and infrastructure grants, the government, associated ministries, and bioincubators also release grants to strengthen the training ecosystem in higher educational institutions by providing funds for seminars, symposia, training workshops, building curricula, and securing infrastructure for training. The smart protein ecosystem has grown in the last few years with an increase in collaboration and knowledge sharing across academia, research institutes, regulatory agencies, government bodies, industry associations, and think tanks to deliberate the opportunities and challenges pertinent to India and also to find creative solutions to bottlenecks, as we always do in India. Aside from GFI India's own flagship initiatives such as the Spark Fellowship focused on advancing research and the Smart Protein Project, which is a student led movement with chapters across major Indian universities, we also interact with multiple other organizations who are at the forefront of talent development. So now we go into the main question: why do we need to map the talent landscape? Why did we carry out this study? One of GFI's core areas of work lies in talent development, and in earlier slides, we established that India has a strong competitive talent pool. We do, in fact, have one of the largest graduate outputs in the world when it comes to core scientific disciplines like biotech, food tech, or agri sciences. However, when it comes to smart proteins, currently the training landscape in India is relatively premature, and we see the need to bridge a certain technical skill and knowledge gap for most graduates to find jobs in the smart protein sector. But to understand where these gaps lie and how to bridge it, we need to map out what the industry requirements are and understand if, from the recruiter's perspective, are graduates industry ready. In general, students are eager to find jobs and learn new skills if it means that they will find a job that aligns with their educational background. But for that, we also need trainers and adequate infrastructure. We need the education and policy stakeholders who create curricula for universities and vocational training centers to realize the importance of this growing sector. So, these questions form the basis of our study. And then we formulated our objectives. Firstly, we aim to understand industry needs by mapping critical skill gaps across job roles, emerging skills, as well as hiring and training preferences. Then we aim to evaluate academic curricula and identify gaps and potential. For this, we engaged with academic faculty and analyzed course curricula in the bachelor's, master's levels across various key smart protein relevant disciplines like food tech, biotech, and so on. We wanted to estimate where the gaps lie in the modules offered and where smart protein topics can be plugged in. This was in addition to mapping graduate output to understand the potential of the workforce. Lastly, to identify how we could address these gaps, we engaged with policy bodies such as sector skill councils who drive workforce development on a national level. And by the end of the study, we wanted to develop a roadmap with structured recommendations for stakeholders across industry, academia, and skilling bodies to collaborate to bridge the skills gap from ideation stage to the implementation of these initiatives. So now I'll briefly touch upon the methodology and tools that we used to carry out this project. One key tool that drove the study was GFI's Alternative Protein Carrier Pathways tool. Spanning across all three verticals of smart proteins, this tool contains the typical job archetypes associated with each focus area. Here it shows plant-based job archetypes, the desired educational backgrounds for each job, critical skills required for each role, and it also displays the courses offered globally to equip oneself in these skills. And on the right here, you will also see that it shows the entire value chain for each modality with a thorough explanation of the roles suitable to each section of the value chain. And this was the tool that we used in all of our stakeholder engagements to define the job archetypes and list critical skills for validation from stakeholders. We took this approach with the goal of creating a global standard for India's upskilling initiatives, closely aligning it with the job roles and skills outlined in the Career Pathways tool. The Career Pathways tool formed the basis of these industry surveys, as I mentioned in the previous slide. Around 20 industry stakeholders from all three verticals of smart proteins participated in these surveys and interviews. Surveys and interviews were also carried out with 19 academic experts from various academic and research institutes, as well as policy stakeholders from skilling bodies. Two focus group discussions were conducted to bring perspectives from a total of 16 experts from industry, academia, and policy in one forum. In parallel, secondary research was also carried out across publicly available resources to determine sector growth potential, key skill gaps across graduates from key scientific disciplines, analysis of the curriculum and training landscape, graduate output, and current government policies and upskilling initiatives. So now we'll dive into our findings. Let's start with the industry perspectives. As you can see on this slide, India is already producing a very large pool of graduates who should be relevant for the smart protein sector. The All India Survey on Higher Education's 2021-22 survey data indicates that nearly 250,000 students graduate each year from smart protein relevant disciplines such as food technology, agricultural sciences, biotechnology, chemical engineering, and so on across UG, PG, and PhD levels. When we engaged with companies operating in the smart protein space, industry stakeholders acknowledged this strong foundational training. But at the same time, they highlighted that most graduates typically require additional exposure to smart protein specific practical skills before they can transition smoothly into industry roles. This is largely because the existing academic programs are designed around conventional food and life science applications, and emerging smart protein technologies are still at an early stage of integration into curricula. Companies do, however, by default conduct induction programs, but there are levels within that geared to bridging this smart protein specific skill gap. Around 60% of respondents reported providing structured on site training for recruits. About 25% indicated a preference for hiring candidates who already have these relevant hands on experience from working in relevant sectors, while 15% mentioned outsourcing parts of skills training to external providers. But what if we were to plug in the upskilling programs or relevant modules that students at the university level could take up as part of their studies that then equip them to be industry ready, keeping every induction process company specific without the need to cover fundamental skills that an incoming recruit should already have? A majority of the industry players also agreed that if these courses emerged, they would even be willing to fully outsource training for their new recruits. From our surveys and interviews, a clear set of technical skill gaps emerged across the smart protein value chain. On the plant based side, companies highlighted gaps in plant protein extraction and functionalization, as well as hands on experience with high moisture extrusion, which is central to texturization and scale up of plant based products. For cultivated meat and fermentation derived proteins, there was a need for stronger grounding in animal cell culture techniques, molecular biology, metabolic engineering, and practical experience with bioreactor operation, bioprocess optimization, and scale up. These skills were deemed critical, especially for emerging startups that are moving from a lab scale to a pilot scale. Across modalities, there were also gaps in experimentation and analytical capabilities. This included conducting food sensory analyses using newer technologies like eNose and eTongue, designing robust experiments, and executing high throughput analytical protocols using tools like HPLC and GCMS. Companies also noted limited exposure to new product formulation using novel smart protein ingredients, particularly at the pilot and pre commercial stages. As the sector matures over the next 5 years, expertise in AI driven data analytics, life cycle assessments, techno-economic analyses, ESG, and novel smart protein related legal and regulatory affairs, to name a few, will be needed as well. So, when we look at bridging the skills gap, we see that many theory based courses already exist, including global offerings like GFI's Protein Transition course and university programs at international institutions. In India, there are currently very few applied training programs focused on smart proteins, although one example is Foresight Biotech's Industrial Training Program, or FSSAI's FOSTAC, for food safety training, but overall availability and specialization to smart protein remains limited. The encouraging part is that the mechanisms to bridge these gaps already exist. Many industry academia MOUs are in place, and national skilling bodies such as the National Skill Development Corporation, or NSDC, ITC FSAN, and FSSAI, to name a few, could play a key role in delivering smart protein tailored certification courses that combine theory, hands on training, and regulatory knowledge. One promising example of how skills gap can be addressed is a training program led by the Food Industry Capacity and Skill Initiative, or FIXI, in collaboration with the Transdisciplinary University, Bengaluru, and GFI India. Together, they developed India's first training of trainers program on plant-based proteins, which was aligned with the Skills India mission and FIXI's nationally recognized qualification framework for a plant-based food technologist role. The program is designed to build trainer capacity so certified instructors can deliver plant based protein courses across the country. It combines core theory with hands on training in areas like extrusion, product formulation, quality and food safety, and commercial scale up. In January 2025, GFI India convened a roundtable with industry and academic stakeholders. Although limited bandwidth and access to specialized equipment like high moisture extruders initially posed challenges, the roundtable unlocked concrete commitments. Academic institutions that have recently acquired extruders expressed their readiness to deliver customized hands on training, while industry players committed to opening up pilot plant facilities for practical learning. This case study demonstrates that with collaborations, shared infrastructure, and recognized certification pathways, scalable and industry aligned smart protein training is well within reach in India. Now, building on the skills gap highlighted by industry, we turn to academia and policy to understand how prepared institutions are to respond and what routes we could explore to provide candidates with the desired skill set. The following slides describe in detail what we learned from these conversations. About 84% of faculty reported high awareness of the smart protein sector. At the same time, only 47% felt that smart protein topics are adequately covered in their current curricula across both theory and practical components. But most importantly, nearly 89% of faculty expressed openness to introducing smart protein modules into their courses, signaling their readiness to adapt, provided that there are clear pathways and support mechanisms. Faculty also converged on one key point. Rather than creating entirely new standalone degrees, smart protein topics should be embedded modularly within the existing UG and PG programs in areas like food technology, biotechnology, and related disciplines. So, this approach allows faster scaling across institutions. Given the strong openness within academia to integrate smart protein learning, the next question we explored was where and how this integration could realistically happen within existing degree structures. So, to address this, our consultants developed a curriculum benchmarking framework designed to systematically map a list of smart protein topics and subtopics against current UG and PG curricula in relevant scientific disciplines. The purpose of this tool was to identify specific points within existing core courses, electives, and practicals where smart protein modules can be meaningfully embedded. As a proof of concept, we applied this framework to syllabi from two undergraduate programs, BTech Biotechnology and BTech Food Technology, offered at two different universities in India. We categorize the topics as fully covered, partially covered, or not covered at all. Kindly note that for display purposes, we have limited the topics on this slide to 3 out of the total 10. The analysis showed that core curricula are strong in foundational science, including protein chemistry, biochemistry, food processing, cell and molecular biology, and new product development. However, smart protein specific content was largely absent from core courses. So, within this red box, you will see that introductions to smart proteins aren't really covered as much. But where relevant content did appear, it was typically limited to partial coverage within electives and optional final year projects, and more on the basic topics that are pertinent to most scientific degrees. So, say University B has an elective on unit operations in their food technology course. Creating modules like extrusion of plant protein, covering protein preparation, functionality during extrusion, and texturization, can add a smart protein component to the course, providing both theoretical as well as practical skills. The benchmarking framework provides a practical, evidence based method to guide curriculum reform, highlighting both existing strengths and clear opportunities for targeted integration. These findings then formed part of our deeper examination of the academic and policy related challenges involved in implementing such updates, which the next slide addresses. So, while there was strong awareness and openness within academia, translating this into curriculum change can be tricky. One major challenge is that curriculum review and approval is a multi step process involving different boards, committees, and governing bodies depending on the type of institution, whether it's an IIT, an ICAR, and CSIR institute, or a public and private university. Syllabus revisions usually go through layered internal approvals and alignment with external regulators like UGC, AICTE, or discipline specific accreditation boards. As a result, then, the time required to introduce new content varies widely across institutions. When it comes to hands on modules, many institutions face limited access to trained instructors and specialized infrastructure, such as bioreactors, extruders, or advanced analytical equipment. Procuring and maintaining this infrastructure also can be a resource intensive and time consuming process for many faculty. There's also a need for stronger industry collaboration and more structured feedback loops. While some partnerships exist, they are not always systematic or sustained, and faculty highlighted that regular input from industry on evolving skill needs would make curriculum updates more responsive and relevant. So, what can be done to introduce smart protein topics within existing curricula? The National Education Policy 2020 promotes curriculum flexibility through tools like the choice based credit system, the academic bank of credits, interdisciplinary electives, and skill based courses. In principle, these mechanisms allow institutions to embed emerging domains like smart proteins more rapidly through a mix of classroom teaching, practical components, as well as online courses. Therefore, leveraging the NEP to incorporate smart protein electives or value added courses could, with time and increasing interest from student and faculty, even turn into core courses or fully fledged major degree programs. Where in house infrastructure is limited, many institutions have actively sought industry partnerships to provide students with hands on exposure through guest lectures, industry led courses, internships, and pilot scale facilities, all encouraged under the NEP 2020. Several universities already have funding to support hands on workshops and training programs, and industry recruiters also express strong interest in collaborating on such joint initiatives. Academic interactions reveal that current teaching across relevant disciplines is still heavily theory oriented, with an approximate 70-30 split between theoretical and practical learning. While this builds strong conceptual understanding, faculty also acknowledge that it can leave graduates hesitant in real world applications. For a faster and more flexible pathway to skill development, alongside degree programs, academic experts highlighted the value of stackable short courses, boot camps, certifications, and micro credentials. These could be co-delivered by academia and industry, both offline and via online learning platforms like NPTEL, and be formally recognized by bodies like UGC, AICTE, or NSDC. A bottom-up approach such as forming national or regional consortia to collectively engage regulators and governing bodies was also suggested as a way to accelerate recognition and adoption of smart protein courses. A recent example of this approach in action is Amity University's recent initiative to revamp its biotechnology curricula. This session, conducted in March 2025, brought together industry and academia for a brainstorming session to align the syllabus with the national bioeconomy and policy priorities. This initiative aimed to tailor curriculum such that it is geared towards maximum employability and upskilling of the students, and is precisely what we need as we grow in this sector. For the last section, we wanted to focus on two main takeaways we had and structures that we propose for stakeholders based on the findings of the study. The focus group discussions that we conducted were pivotal in converging multi-stakeholder insights into our learnings. First, we propose building a national smart protein training ecosystem anchored in shared infrastructure and collaboration. Several large public and private institutions, such as the IITs, NIFTMs, CSIRs, and ICARs, are already equipped with advanced facilities, including extruders, bioreactors, 3D food printers, and analytical instrumentation labs. However, this capacity is currently concentrated in a small number of major research and learning centers. This model here proposes designating these institutions along with their bioincubators as regional training hubs. These hubs can serve as shared access centers where students, faculty, and trainers from multiple institutions are exposed to hands-on learning and equipment operation that would otherwise be difficult to access. This hub-based approach is strengthened by industry pilot facilities. Through internships, placements, and capstone or project-based learning, students can gain exposure to real-world manufacturing and scale-up environments. With supportive policy frameworks, this ecosystem can expand over time and improve access to hands-on training. Additionally, for regional training hubs to remain effective, they must be embedded within a broader national education and skilling framework, which depends on three interconnected actors: policy and education bodies, academic and vocational training institutes, and industry players. Policymakers and regulatory bodies play a central role in this ecosystem by accrediting and standardizing training offerings, including certified workshops, short term courses, and micro credentials across diploma, undergraduate, and postgraduate levels. Alignment with bodies like UGC, AICTE, and NSDC ensures quality recognition and portability of these credentials nationwide. Policy support is also critical for infrastructure building grants, particularly for hands on training units that are housed within the hubs that I mentioned in the previous slide. The diagram also illustrates the importance of public-private partnership models. The BIRAC Biomanufacturing Hubs grant provides a strong example of how integrated infrastructure such as biofoundries can be co-developed to support both scale-up and skills training. On the academic side, institutions can leverage these policy frameworks to co-create accredited courses, workshops, and boot camps with industry partners, revise curricula based on emerging skill needs, and use hubs and pilot plants as real-world training centers. Industry, in turn, contributes by offering feedback on skill gaps observed in new recruits and opening facilities for training and internships. As technologies, workforce needs, and industry practices evolve, continuous cyclical feedback between key players is absolutely essential to ensure that training systems, curricula, and policies remain aligned and responsive to the growing sector. So, to conclude, India already has strong higher education and industrial foundations. The key challenge lies in anticipating new skill needs and integrating them swiftly into accredited, nationally recognized training pathways. And as a think tank, GFI India is happy to facilitate these initiatives and make connections with stakeholders and support the formation of consortia with anybody who would be interested in collaborating on education and workforce development in smart proteins. I hope this presentation was useful in charting next steps for everyone watching this. Do watch this space for an announcement on the full study report that will be releasing soon. For all the students watching, we hope that this was interesting and got you motivated to explore careers in smart protein. The sector is in need of passionate, talented individuals like yourselves. We'd also like to thank our consultants for this study, Idobro Impact Solutions, for all their contributions. We're also grateful to the GFI India team for their support. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening in. We are now open for Q&A. Please drop your questions in the question and answer box, and we are happy to answer them. I do see that we have a few questions here. So, yeah, Priyanshu, to your question, what are the sets of AI tools or software that can be used for research in the smart protein space, especially in biomass fermentation of single-celled proteins? The main use of AI is mostly to, I think, model yield and to sort of evaluate the final yield that will be obtained through processes that are currently ongoing. So yeah, for that, regarding AI tools, AlgoCell and TesselGen are a few tools that you can use. Additionally, there are some open source as well as some paid tools that you can use for other software in general. And BioSteam could be an example for bioprocess modeling. There's also a few JMP or SPSS for DOE and lab-based optimization. So, in terms of searching for scientific literature, you can use tools like Perplexity AI, Consensus AI, Dimensions AI, and Semantic Scholar, which are of very much use. I hope that answered your question. We also see one more question from Jayaram. How about considering microbial physiologist very critical in understanding microbial physiology during fermentation to maximize protein yield? Absolutely. I think the most important thing is that the skills align. In terms of technical skills, a microbial physiologist or anybody who studies a microbiology degree could pretty much equip themselves with the technical skills through relevant upskilling programs or through industry exposure in order to work their way into a microbial physiologist role. Happy to answer any other questions. I see one question from Karan here. Which product segments are closest to going to market or are reaching customers? I think at the moment, plant-based is rapidly growing, especially within India. Abroad, it's already been established quite a bit. At this point, I'd also like to invite my colleague Chandana to answer any questions. But right now, I think mycelium and fermentation is also seeing an uptick. Um, and with a lot more companies setting up in India as well. And additionally, with regulatory dossiers being submitted and the regulatory pathways easing up a little bit, cultivated meat is also seeing an uptick. And there's a lot of companies that are working on really sound research and making really great strides forward. Any other questions? Priyanshu, your question on SOPs for the All Protein project. These are all available in the drive if you are part of the Smart Protein project, as well as a lot of information is present on the All Protein project webpage. Please do take a look at it. There's also impact reports and summaries from successes that other groups have had. There's also an industry database of industry experts that are happy to engage with all protein project chapters. So that's one avenue that you could definitely use for future initiatives. Okay, happy to answer any other questions. Okay, I see one more question here on why smart protein relevant skills are required right now, despite the growing scientific graduate output in India. And yes, it is true that India produces a strong volume of graduates in food tech and biotechnology, but most undergraduate and postgraduate programs focus on food tech and for conventional food systems and biotech skills for biomedical applications. Smart protein hands-on skills like high moisture extrusion or bioprocess optimization or exposure to metabolic engineering tools in molecular biology or even advanced analytical tools like GCMS or HPLC can be very, very sector specific. And so, as a result, graduates often require that additional upskilling before they can transition into smart protein industry roles. Being a very transdisciplinary field and a translational field, even though we have a lot of graduates from allied scientific fields, we do require those additional technical skills in potential recruits. Okay. I see one more question here. What changes has the new education policy brought? The NEP 2020 recognized the existing rigid curricula, and it provides flexibility through tools like interdisciplinary electives and experiential learning. One really good thing about the NEP is that it also allows credit accumulation. So students are able to go to external industry placements or internships or get certifications externally and add them to their current courses, which is very, very valuable, especially when we consider a growing sector such as this. This ensures that project-based learning happens without restructuring entire degree programs. Okay. Yeah, so I see one question from Karan here. What could be relevant opportunities for a recent economics and politics graduate in the realm of policy, government, agri-food economics, etc.? Great question, Karan. I think you could, and I might be biased in answering this, but you could definitely consider joining a nonprofit. This, I think, blends together everything really well. We also have a lot of experts within our policy team who work at the apex of smart proteins as well as advocacy and engage with a lot of people in the government. Um, Also, having an economics background really helps um, um, in terms of just analyzing the industry landscape. And you could also do consultant roles where you speak with companies and help them get established in the sector. One thing that we always note is in terms of scale up from pilot stages to commercial stages, a lot of companies find that difficult. So, especially in a growing sector such as this, so your expertise would be really helpful in an advisory role in that side as well. Hope that answered your question. Okay. One more question here is any key takeaways for stakeholders after this study? Um, um, One major takeaway that we realized is that every type of stakeholder, regardless of industry, academia, or policy, is open to promoting upskilling of students and having more technically equipped graduates, especially in smart protein, with government support coming in terms of the Bio E3 policy and other infrastructure building grants. There is a lot of potential for the sector. So there will be the need for cross-sectoral collaboration within academia, industry, and policy. Um, I think forming consortia could be the key step that gets all of this started. It's essential that we have perspectives from every stakeholder to start building these programs. GFI India has a lot of resources that we can provide for this as well, and we can get these courses started in the development stage, and then we can take that towards policymakers and the relevant ministries for implementation. Again, industry will come in here in terms of providing facilities at their pilot plants, providing internships and various opportunities that provide students with real world application skills of the knowledge that they gain through their upskilling programs. So India basically does not need to build its smart protein talent ecosystem from scratch. The foundations in higher education, industry capability, and policy frameworks already exist. The priority now is coordinated action. We need to embed smart protein topics within existing curricula and expand hands-on training. So again, one more key here is to build and maintain continuous feedback loops between these stakeholders so that training systems can evolve alongside um, evolving industry needs and the rapidly advancing sector. I see one question here from Shreya, which says, why do we need to introduce sector-specific course in UG programs? I believe UGs are for broader skill learning, which generally gives students a broader perspective and flexibility to choose specifications in masters or later. Also, technical skills like extrusion are for a niche sector like smart protein, which can be done as a certification. This is what we are recommending as well. The one thing that we are saying is that bringing in some form of introductory modules within pre-existing modules will also provide students with sufficient exposure to learn about what the smart protein sector is. Currently, there is a lot of lack of awareness even within students. And while faculty are experienced and are aware of the sector, the content isn't present in curricula in order to provide students with this awareness. So, to fill roles later on, we need to expose students to this in the undergraduate level. Regardless of how small or big of an aspect it is within their degree, regardless of whether it's an elective or a small certification course, we believe that it would be beneficial for students to know about the sector and to have maximum opportunities to utilize their upskilling potential. I hope that answered your question. All right. I think we will finish with that. If there's any more questions, please feel free to reach out to me or to Chandana or to anybody on the GFI India team. Please take a look at the report that is releasing tomorrow. Keep an eye on our socials for the same. And I thank everybody for staying on. And thank you so much for joining. Hope this was helpful and hope that you learned something and hope that newer collaborations can be made. We are always happy to support, regardless of whatever it is, as long as there is interest in education and workforce in smart protein. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your day.